When it comes to repairs, landlords are responsible for 4 different things. The first one is that they're responsible for all common areas. Common areas are considered anything that is outside your apartment door. So the hallways, the parking lots, and those types of items will be the landlord's repair responsibilities. If you happen to damage something in those areas, you can be held responsible for it, but the landlord is ultimately the one who has to make those repairs to that portion of the property. The second thing that the landlord is responsible for is any supplied equipment. That means if when you moved in, the washer and dryer were in the basement, the landlord is responsible for repairing the washer and the dryer. If they want you to do the repairs yourself on those types of items, they could sell it to you for $1 and that would end up being your responsibility. But otherwise, if it was supplied with the apartment when you got it, the landlord will be responsible for it. So if you have 3 burners on your stove at work, then they are responsible for fixing the 4th burner to make sure that all the supplied equipment works. The other thing that they're responsible for is making sure that your house is a functioning home, that the plumbing, the electrical, and all the structural types of things that make a building a functional building, that's also the landlord's responsibility. The final thing that the landlord is responsible for is making sure that they follow all the local housing codes. If you live in a city that's over 40,000 people, it's very likely that you do have a building inspector and that they do have specific codes that they expect you to follow locally. Throughout Wisconsin, most of those codes should be very similar, but they may vary from place to place. So it's helpful if you call your building inspector if you have any questions regarding what kind of repairs the landlords might be responsible for in those areas. One other thing that's really important to note is when it comes to smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, there's sort of a shared responsibility. It's the landlord's responsibility to make sure that they provide you with a functioning smoke detector. If the smoke detector needs any type of maintenance, like you have to replace the battery every year, then it's the tenant's is required to make sure that they do that. So if there are any repairs that are necessary to the smoke detector, make sure you contact your landlord immediately, and they have 5 days to make those repairs. In the city of Madison, there are some additional smoke detector requirements. I would check with the Madison Fire Department to make sure that those additional requirements are met. Largely, there's going to be additional requirements for smoke detectors in more areas of the house. And they are required to use either hardwired smoke detectors or smoke detectors that have a 10-year lithium battery that's encased within the smoke detector so tenants cannot remove them. Largely, the tenants are responsible for anything that they have damaged to the apartment. The law says that you're supposed to repair or pay the landlord to repair any damages that might happen while you're living there, as long as it's not something that would routinely happen within the apartment. We don't recommend that the tenants do the repairs themselves. Repairs are much better done by the landlord, so they make sure that they get done correctly, and then the tenant can reimburse them for those expenses. In some cases, however, the landlords just don't make the repairs, and if you do want to sort of negotiate something with the landlord about making those repairs, we highly recommend that you get those items in writing. The other thing that tenants are responsible for is anything that's considered a minor repair. The law is a little bit hard to understand in this regard because it just says that you have to pay for anything that is minor in relationship to rent. So if your rent is $2,000 and you have a $100 repair, is that minor? Sadly, that's going to be up to a judge, and so we can't really give you any clear guidelines there. But generally speaking, replacing light bulbs and doing minor maintenance around the house will be the tenant's responsibility. Almost everything else then falls to the landlord's responsibility. In some cases, tenants may move into an apartment and there's some sort of an agreement that is made. Maybe the tenant is a painter and they're going to paint the apartment. If that's going to happen, we do again highly recommend that you get something like that in writing, that you agree in advance how that's going to be paid and how much is going to be paid. We see lots of disputes over tenants who move in and are going to clean an apartment or do some other kind of work for a landlord, and there's not a real clear agreement up front, and then later there's disputes about how much time the tenant spent or how much money should be paid.